Hey guys, in the match yesterday between Goff and Navarro, I'm sure you noticed that Coco was not on the same page with her coaching staff. So I thought this is a good opportunity to share my opinion on whether on-court coaching can benefit professional players or not. Let me start off by talking about coaching in general. And the worse a player is, the more coaching is required. The better the player is, the less coaching is required. If we're talking about recreational level players or even junior level players, they can benefit greatly from coaching because they're simply going to make a lot of mistakes. Whether these are mistakes that are tactical, technical, or mental, coaches are going to be crucial in the process of developing a player. While pro level coaching is not widely encompassing all aspects of player development simply because the player is already developed, it is crucial because players are looking to get that extra 1 to 5% out of their game. Now, can players succeed without coaching? They absolutely can. There has been many examples of players who have done well without a coach. For example, Danielle Collins, when she won Miami and Charleston back to back, she did this without a coach. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Just picture Sinner and Alcaraz arriving at Wimbledon without a coach. Would they be able to reach the semifinals? I think they would. But how about winning the title and becoming Wimbledon champion? Well, this is where coaching can be extremely beneficial. In the Surf podcast, Andy Roddick dropped some golden nuggets. He talked about Tariq Benabilis being one of his most influential coaches because he coached Roddick when he was very young. And Roddick credits him with being able to get into the top 10. Now, Roddick also said that as he matured as a player and became more experienced, he didn't require as much coaching, but he still hired coaches because he was looking for that extra 1 to 5%. For example, he hired Jimmy Connors as a coach for one specific reason.
When I'm looking for a coach in '06, when I bring on Jimmy, I knew that when I was teeing off first round, Arthur Ashe Stadium, under the lights, US Open, he knew exactly what I was feeling when I walked out there. So you hire a coach for a year for those 5 matches where it's like, I get it. You look up and he's going, come, he feels it. He knows it. He's giving you some advice on when to use the crowd in Ashe, when to stay silent. Don't bring him in unless you need it. All of these little bits of advice. And, that's something that you need at that moment. I don't need someone to kind of tell me what I already know. So at a certain point, the audience for feedback becomes a lot smaller the better you get.
Let's talk about Roger Federer's coaches. He has had many throughout his career, but one in particular that was interesting to me was Ivan Ljubicic. And it seemed like the perfect choice for Roger because Ivan not only beat Roger when he actively played on tour, but he also competed against Roger's top competitors. So this was a perfect fit for Roger. Now, a lot of you guys remember the 2017 Australian Open final between Federer and Nadal. And there has been so many videos made on YouTube about how Federer changed his backhand in that particular match when he was down a break in the 5th set and he started hitting one backhand winner after another. So in the Functional Tennis podcast, Fabio asked Ivan whether he changed his backhand.
How did you convince Roger to change his backhand?
Well, first of all, I didn't change his backhand. That's the first answer. It's more maybe how he uses his backhand. But that was, I think everything kind of clicked in that Australian Open final in 2017 against Rafa. He decided to take the ball early and hit that backhand flat and then just worked out so well in that match that he kept doing it for many months and years later. So that was something that it's just worked out. It was not, again, coaching at that level doesn't really look like, okay, Roger, why don't you hit the backhand like this? And then he steps in and does it. It doesn't work like that. So, but I think that particular match gave him a lot of confidence with that shot, and he then kept using it.
So history has shown that the best players receive their coaching off the court. We don't get to see it. Back in the day, you didn't really see players look up to their box very often, but things have changed. Now players are communicating a lot more with their coaching staff during matches. And it's not only that, there also seems to be a dependency on the coaches. So when things are not working well, players are helplessly looking up to their coaching staff to get some advice. And here's the thing about on-court coaching. First of all, tennis is an individual sport. You are out there on your own. You can't pass the ball off to anybody else. There's simply nowhere to hide when it comes to tennis. You gotta go out there and perform. See, the reason why coaching works in other sports is, first of all, it's a team and players have certain positions and the coach has to organize those positions and make sure they work properly. There are also timeouts where the coach can get his players together and strategize with them. Now, the closest thing to that in tennis is Davis Cup, which is a team competition, and the coach is responsible for selecting the players that are going to play singles and doubles. And the coach is also allowed to sit on the bench and talk to the players. However, outside of team competitions in tennis, we're talking about individual tournaments where players are out there by themselves. In the past, coaching was not allowed, but coaching was still happening. Coaches were throwing signals at the lower levels. The coach and the player would meet during the bathroom breaks. So coaching during matches has always been a thing. The difference now is that it's allowed. But in my opinion, most players are not benefiting from the current coaching system on the professional tour. And let me tell you why. In tennis, time is of the essence. The quicker something happens in tennis, the more intuitive it becomes. This is true for technique in itself, but it's also true for the tennis game in general. So in other words, when you're playing a point at that level, it goes by so quickly. The ball's coming back so fast. There's absolutely no time for you to execute tactics or make technical adjustments to your strokes. You're playing with your intuition. What you can't do, however, is select tactics prior to the point starting, whether you are serving or returning. So it does make sense that a coach could give the player some advice between the points, for example, where to serve or how to construct the point. However, time is of the essence and players only have 20 seconds between points. See, when it comes to a practice match, on-court coaching works really well because you are not under this time pressure and you can take a minute or two between the points, talk to your player and make sure that they are fully grasping and absorbing the information that you're presenting to them. The logistics of on-court coaching also don't make a lot of sense because you are allowed to be coached when you're on the side of the court where your coach is sitting. And you are not allowed to be coached when you're on the opposite side. So even if you find yourself on the same side as the coach, sometimes you're so far away and the coach ends up shouting at you. And it creates all these awkward interactions between the player and the coach. So in my opinion, there are two solutions to this problem. You can make professional tennis like Davis Cup and allow the coach to sit on your bench. And now, during the changeovers, there's going to be a little bit more time for the coach to deliver the information to the player and for the player to absorb the information. Something similar to this was allowed on the WTA Tour for a while and was later abandoned. Players were allowed to call their coach on the court. I don't think it's a good idea for us to be able to hear the interactions between the player and the coach. I'm going to tell you why, because it puts the coach under a tremendous amount of pressure. See, during that stretch on the WTA where coaches were allowed to go on the court, I did see some good coaching, no doubt about it, but I also saw some poor coaching where coaches were coming on the court and were rattling off instructions, and it almost seemed like they were pressured to do so because they were mic'd and they wanted to leave a good impression. And there were also instances which were very uncomfortable to watch where there was tension between the player and the coach. For example, the player is staring straight ahead and not listening to the coach while the coach is talking into the player's ear, or arguments and fights between the player and the coach. And I think this is the reason why the WTA abandoned on-court coaching in this manner. I do think that having a coach sit on your bench and every changeover, with the coach not being mic'd, will relax the coach without having the need to constantly give instructions. Because if you watch Davis Cup or even the Saber Cup, you'll often see that when the players are at the changeover, the coach is not saying anything. When things are going well in tennis, you just let the player do their thing. By saying too much, you can make the player play worse. So having a coach on the bench is something that would be a lot better than having the coach yell from the stands. But something that would be even better than that is to allow coaching between each set, off the court, off the camera, off the mic. And you allow the coach and the player 5 minutes to come up with a strategy for the next set. Brad Gilbert, when he was coaching Agassi in the final at the French Open versus Andre Medvedev, Agassi lost the first 2 sets, and then there was a rain delay in the 3rd set, and Andre got a chance to talk to Brad. And because there was a longer period of time, Andre was able to settle down, and he came back on the court a completely new player, won the next 3 sets, and won the French Open title. So time is of the essence. I don't think you're going to see the quality of tennis improve if you allow the current coaching system where coaches are yelling from the stands when the player is on their side of the court. You might see some improvements with Davis Cup style coaching, but even here it might be limited because between changeovers there's not a lot of time either. So to me the best solution is to allow coaching between each set and allow more time for the player to properly get their head straight, and I think you would see the quality of tennis improve. Now how about going back to the good old days and not allowing coaching at all and letting players figuring out on their own? I do think there's a lot of value to a player figuring out how to win. See, that's what differentiates the great champions from the regular players. When great champions are playing their worst, their opponent is playing amazing, they figure out a way to win, where other players end up losing those same matches. And it is those players who can benefit from coaching. Let me finish up with Alcaraz and Sinner, who are obviously often looking into the box and receiving coaching. And I'm going to compare this to the Benavides-Roddick situation. Both Sinner and Alcaraz are still young, they're still improving. I think what you will see over time that they are going to be less dependent on coaching as time goes on. I will say that there's a difference between Alcaraz and Sinner. I think Alcaraz relies on coaching a little bit too much at times. It's hard to say whether this is affecting Carlos in a negative way. After all, he's playing amazing, just won the French Open. But again, a different style of coaching, one that's not so constant, would possibly benefit even someone like Alcaraz.